Support, Mr. Speaker, of my amendment to the REINS Act.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 9, printed in Part A of House Report number 118-108, offered by Mr. Good of Virginia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 495, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Good, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the REINS Act is a very important piece of legislation for us to pass to rein in the unaccountable bureaucratic state that, yes, is telling Americans what kind of cars they can drive, and much more than that, as we know, with the regulations and the rules that are coming out of the unelected bureaucratic state. But rules like the VA abortion rule that was recently put in place by the Biden administration would unfortunately not qualify as a major rule under the REINS Act. So my amendment would make any agency rule that increases access to abortion subject to congressional review. I'm proud of this amendment because it's the first standalone pro-life amendment vote the House will take this year. My amendment will counter the radical pro-death agenda the Biden administration promotes throughout their entire administration. The REINS Act will significantly restore appropriate and constitutional congressional oversight for the out-of-control bureaucracy. It's a step towards ending the Washington knows best attitude that too often prevails in this town. It's a step towards freedom and less government oppression for all Americans. It's a step towards fiscal responsibility. But in addition to the underlying bill, I urge all of my colleagues to support my pro-life amendment, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek to be recognized?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, we have a very, very clear difference of perspective here. The gentleman talks about the right to life. I talk about the right to freedom. The right to reproductive freedom is a core human right that is protected by our Constitution. The majority of the work our agencies do has little to do with the private decisions women make with the consultation of their doctors. But in an effort to continue the culture wars, my colleagues have added this purposefully politicized amendment to signal that they, contrary to their supposed beliefs, do think that big government is good, and that big government's reach extends to a woman's private decisions about what to do with her body. All the rhetoric about the REINS Act is that big government is bad. We should have less government. That's all the rhetoric of the Republican Party generally. And yet here, they're saying that government should reach into the private decisions of a woman with respect to her own body, made in consultation with her doctor and perhaps with her husband or whoever, but it's up to her. And government should determine her decision for her. I oppose this amendment and the Republicans' crusade to create more laws about what we can do with our bodies and our reproductive decisions, because government should not be in the business of dictating private decisions to private people. I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's refreshing to hear for the first time, I think, since I came to Congress 2.5 years ago, that my friends on the other side actually care about the freedoms of Americans as they continue to try to control every aspect of Americans' lives. And yet the other side used to be the party of safe, legal, and rare when it came to abortion. And while I am unashamedly, unapologetically a believer in life from conception, I don't believe we ought to negotiating the timeline when it comes to when you can kill a child in the womb. However, the other side has become the party of abortion at any time, for any reason, up until the moment of birth. Or I would challenge my friends on the other side to tell us when they actually would restrict abortion. And yet, the Republican Party should be proudly the party of life. And the Supreme Court, which recently ruled about a year ago now, overturning the Roe v. Wade and the Dobbs decision, returned the responsibility on abortion to the people's representatives. And so it ought to be up to Congress to vote to approve any agency rule that increases access to abortion. And that's what this amendment does, and I urge everyone to support this amendment, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves.
Gentleman reserves.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Gentleman from Virginia.
And I'm prepared to close also.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Chairman, the Republican Party claims to be the party of freedom, but not when it comes to women and the decisions they make with respect to their own bodies. Then it's the party of government repression and dictation. You cannot do what you decide to do. You cannot do what you think is best. You must do what the government thinks is best, namely, not have an abortion. I proudly support the right to abortion. I believe abortion should be safe and legal. Whether it's rare is up to the individuals. But it is a personal freedom. The Democratic Party supports personal freedom, unlike the Republican Party, which, though claiming to support personal freedom, seeks to repress it. A party that says you cannot decide what to do with your own body. A party that says you cannot read what we don't want you to read. A party that says, let's ban books, let's ban plays, let's take them out of the school libraries, let's take them out of the public libraries. Some freedom. I oppose this amendment. It is another example of the Republican Party's attempt to suppress freedom, and it must not pass. I yield back.